we started this project, we asked locals to tell us about their housing struggles in the Finding Home survey. And what we heard is that it is not just low-wage folks who are finding it difficult to access housing. It is teachers, nurses, young professionals, and people trying to grow their families. Housing options happen on a continuum that stretches from emergency shelter for the unhoused all the way to those seeking home ownership. Affordable housing is not one thing. And our argument is that there really needs to be investment at every place along this continuum so individuals and families can move to greater security and find the homes that best meet their needs. We have a shortage at every place along this continuum. And whenever we have a shortage in one place, it puts pressure on other types of housing all across the continuum. Another key message is that this crisis will only deepen if we don't invest in dramatically increasing our stock of housing options. The American Recovery Funds, which will be coming to our city and our county over the next 2 years, represent a historic opportunity to make significantly increased public investments in our supply of housing. These funds are to be used to address the effects of the pandemic. And one of the most profound effects has been the influx of new residents, pandemic refugees. And this can only be addressed by greatly increasing our housing stock from rentals to workforce housing and beyond. Growing thoughtfully and creatively and leveraging these funds will require great planning and leadership. And that is why our first policy recommendation is that the planning departments of the city and the county have the resources to design a joint, comprehensive 10-year housing strategy. That's the kind of vision that we at Thrive Asheville think our community really needs. Big picture, long range, so we can really get things done. Many places in this video, you'll hear speakers talking about the city because the city has been such an active partner in funding some of the solutions that you'll hear about. The county has as well, but what we desperately need is even more of this type of collaboration. Finally, I'll just say that we as residents should prepare for change because the rules that determine how we build and grow were established to privilege white people. We know that Black residents and other people of color have been locked out of safe neighborhoods and generational wealth. So expanding housing access isn't just an issue about growth, it is an issue of equity. We have to be prepared to change. We cannot insist on the same rules and practices because those are the tools that got us into this space. If we care about equity, we will have to embrace changing neighborhoods and a growing city and county.
We have the opportunity and the know-how with all of you on this call and others. And please check out that list that will be available on the Thrive Asheville website after this.
Initially, so like I told y'all, Greg and I and Kate, we were in the background and I served as a consultant on this project. And when we started talking to Dewana specifically about opportunities in terms of the down payment assistance, I was just like, I don't like this. I don't like how it's set up. I don't know that we should be advocating for this policy. And Greg and Kate and I, we went back and forth. And then Kate texted me and said, well, Dewana's program doesn't limit mobility. The program they're doing at the YMI doesn't make people stay in their home for 25 years. They can grow their families. So can you tell us a little bit about the program you're developing over at the YMI?
Yes. Thankfully, our home ownership program is a part of our operations gateway. So our main focus, and if you don't know the YMI, our mission is to elevate Black people. And we're very intentional. I'm very intentional about that. And so this program, I developed the Black Economic Solvency Program and home ownership, given my working in banking and self-help and going through my own home ownership journey here as a native. I went through a 4-year journey. And I just bought my house in January. So it was a struggle. And so the things that I learned, for some reason, I have a problem with developing programs based off of things that I learned to hopefully try to mitigate the roadblocks that other people might be experiencing. And yes, redlining is real. The challenges that you face, a lot of these down payment assistance programs have a lot of stipulations and requirements and really don't allow you to be able to leverage your home ownership. That is leverage. That is what has generated wealth. People have used it as leverage to generate wealth for generations and centuries. You know what I'm saying? So it took away from that when you have to be in your house 25 years. I'm like, what if something happened to my mom and I need to go? And so now I'm responsible for paying back a percentage of this money that takes away from my wealth, the wealth that I generated. You know what I mean? In this house and my equity and the things that I invested. So it's like, for me, it was a way to, thankfully, through the help of, I applied for a grant with self-help for my successful transitions program, which focuses on home ownership and other things. And so I was able to expand my home ownership components to my successful transitions program and apply to Dogwood Health for a grant for down payment assistance. And so I wanted to make it easy. I wanted to make it as easy as possible. I feel like as Black people, we have been through enough, and it's enough challenges, even when you have the down payment assistance, of navigating the financial institutions, even with that down payment assistance. So I just wanted to make one part of that process easy.
One thing that I heard during this conversation with Dewana, and I've heard about our other down payment assistance programs from Greg, is that we don't have enough funding in those programs. So I guess my question is, how much does, and this is for Greg, Paul, D'Angelo, Dewana, or Scott, how much does one need really for a down payment for a home in the Asheville city limits?
I say about 50. I said close to $50,000. Like, that's crazy. Like, on my block where I grew up, is like my dad owned houses there, but I've seen houses that have been going, 2-bedroom houses that's been going for $300,000, $400,000. And when you don't qualify for that much, first of all, that's a big thing that people got to understand. The wages actually produces what you're qualified for, to get lending services for. And so when you don't qualify for that amount, it pushes you out, because there's no way you go afford a house under $200,000 or $250,000. You know what I mean? In Asheville, that's not a fixer-upper. And one big thing that stood out to me is that most of the homes that are at the $275,000 mark in Asheville, in the city proper, are fixer-uppers. And when you get in lending services, you have to get a move-in ready house. It cannot be a fixer-upper. And that's what people fail to realize. Like, that's what's a part of the journey that's pushing people out into the county, and pushing people out of city limits.
Just want to also just ask this question to Scott specifically, because I know that Mountain Housing Opportunities does a lot of building and development. Like, why are these houses so high?
Well, as Athena said during the breakout session, one of the breakout sessions, it's really about supply and demand. It's because we have regulations that restrict housing supply by making it very difficult to develop in some cases. And the demand, we're a popular area, and people are coming from markets where they might sell their house for $500,000 or $750,000. And so they come here and pay $350,000 or $400,000 without stretching as far as people who work here. And it's really, if your income is employment based in Buncombe County, the average job, you're going to have a struggle compared to people that come with investment income. and a large equity from the sale of their home in the larger markets. Part of it in the recent months is about the rapidly escalating demand for the smaller communities relative to the large urban because of the COVID. People wanting to move to a more, what they consider a more rural area, even though Asheville is a city and we're a metro county. And the cost of materials has escalated rapidly. We're hoping that that's not going to stay that way forever, that it'll moderate a little bit. And on the rental side, we have a lot of parts of the community that are zoned for single family housing. And that disproportionately weighs against people of color just by the statistics that if your next door neighbor is a renter, they are 3 times more likely to be African American than if your next door neighbor is a homeowner. And so zoning, if you look at the root of zoning in Asheville and Buncombe County, zoning, single family, large lot zoning, I should say, it was intended to be discriminatory practice. And it still has that impact when it's single family, large lot zoning.
If you're new to the affordable housing conversation, I think there are a couple points I like to make just as we move the conversation along. And the first thing is you might hear us talking about home ownership, and then you might hear us talk about renting, and then you might hear us talk about apartments. And so Greg, Kate, and I, like when we sat down, that was the first thing that we kind of had to reconcile, is that buying a home is not the best option for every person, but everybody deserves to have a home to live in. So some people might prefer to be in a condo, or they might prefer to be in an apartment, or they might prefer to be in a duplex. And so we wanted to take away in this particular project in the affordable housing conversation to talk about people literally having a safe place to lay their family's head at night and being able to afford that no matter where they are on that continuum of buying a home, or whether they are, just trying to rent, or if they, needed shelter.
As Aisha was mentioning, we know that we really have to invest in all of these different places. And some of the strategies that we propose are really short-term strategies. They can create immediate improvement and immediately release pressure on this whole affordable housing crisis. And accepting vouchers are one of those easy, low-hanging fruit that we can actually help families right now move into safer neighborhoods, which helps take people off of waiting lists who are currently trying to get into public housing. So that's an immediate action that we can take as a community, is to try and increase those incentives and supports for landlords and tenants. So we need to work on those short-term issues at the same time. Again, while we're really advocating for this long-term vision, construction of new units is going to take a lot of time. And that's why it's so urgent that our city and county work together to have those long-term plans in place at the same time. So just kind of wanted to say short-term, long-term have to happen together.
Can you tell us if the city is investing in the landlord to tenant partnership program, and how it's affected your work as well?
Yeah, the city, we did invested, I think, $100,000, I believe, Kate, to be a part of that. And we are having some additional meetings regarding how we can get more landlords to accept vouchers. We've actually required it in a lot of our city subsidy investment where we didn't before. It was suggested, so we're moving in that area. Plus, with a lot of these emergency rental vouchers, a lot geared towards homeless, we'll be having more conversations at our committee levels to how do we get more landlords to accept vouchers, not only through Thrive Asheville, but in partnership with Homeward Bound, with the Housing Authority, et cetera.
I just need to understand from a business perspective. So I know that the vouchers help people who want to get into these homes, but what incentive or why would a landlord choose to participate in the landlord-tenant partnership?
The city, because of their funding, we get a little bit of money from the Dogwood Health Trust in the beginning, and then the city really is the primary funder of this right now. Allows us to give landlords a $2,400 financial stipend for learning about the process and participating in the process. They also get a 1-month security deposit and $10,000 worth of indemnification. And then both landlords and tenants get access to relevant training. Aisha Adams helps provide training to our landlords, and we have tenant coaches who provide training to our tenants, because we know that one of the issues here is when we're asking people to move out of neighborhoods into new neighborhoods, they face new social challenges and new responsibilities. So we want to make sure that everybody is really equipped to be successful in new situations.
So we've seen a lot of public pushback for development in terms of building just about anything. I know there's a developer on the call tonight I've had a conversation with about the pushback in development. I wonder, what can we do as a community to show and teach the need for more housing, more development, and how can we show how that enriches our life here in Asheville? Because on the one hand, we want affordable housing, and on the other hand, it feels like we don't want more development. So any suggestions from our panel?
I have some strong opinions, as most people know, about this. I feel that there's a lot of people who see themselves as progressive, who oppose all development near downtown or in the urban core, saying somehow that that's for environmental reasons. But if there's a demand for hotel rooms or apartments or condominiums near downtown, and you prohibit it in downtown or near, then it's going to be built anyway, because the demand is there. And so people are going to drive farther in. That if a hotel is out at the perimeter in a ring of, you could call it a hotel zone if certain areas won't allow it, then they're going to drive into downtown anyway, and then the hotel is not responsible for their parking. So environmentally, I do not see that the anti-development sentiment that seems to have mushroomed in our community is helpful in any way to the environment, and it's absolutely not helpful to people who are trying to get to their jobs downtown, and people who have commuting costs that may be as high as 50 cents a mile or more if you look at the cost of owning and maintaining an automobile.
It seems like developers have not been held accountable and sticking to the commitment of affordable units, deeply affordable units. What could we as a community do to ensure that the new developments don't continue to push out the very people that we're advocating for?
There is a thing called inclusionary zoning. I mentioned it in the breakout group. I like the phrase because it points out that most zoning is exclusionary and is creating exclusive neighborhoods. And the problem is that the General Assembly doesn't smile on Asheville and Buncombe County doing inclusionary zoning. And there's some trade associations that would come out opposed to it if we tried to do that. I think in the long term, it's an answer, because if you develop 200 units, having a rule that, or an ordinance or legislation that says, say 10% of those need to be affordable to a certain income, that does two good things. It creates more affordable housing supply, which I've said that we need, and I feel strongly we need more permanently affordable, deeply affordable housing supply. But it also creates more diverse neighborhoods, and neighborhoods that are not exclusive but are inclusive.
Something that has been suggested by Success Equation affordable housing advocates for a while, particularly with the county, is that some of the funds available, some of the dollars that could be used for affordable housing not be immediately expensed to existing programs, but instead be held back so that it's kind of a flexible fund, so that when a developer comes to create a new development, the county has available funds to layer on top right away to increase the affordability, so that a developer can come and say, I'm going to build 100 units, and the county can say, great, we've got this money set aside. We're going to go ahead and help you make sure that you've got at least 10% of those units, or dreamy 20% of those units that can be deeply affordable. So that's a suggestion for our county folks, as well as our city.
At the City of Asheville, we really, because as Scott said, we can't do inclusionary zoning. All the developers who come to us to talk about adding new units, we talk to them about the tools that we have to try to incentivize what we call 20-80-20, which is at least 20% of the units at or below 80% of the area median income for individuals and families for at least 20 years. So everybody kind of gets that sales pitch. And we have the tools to be able to make that happen, where we're trying to meet them at least halfway.
So I've worked with the city. I think that the city is a great resource for all citizens in Asheville, but it really frightens me that so much of the destiny of Black and Brown people rests in the hands of what the city chooses to do. And it seems like all of these policies continue to keep the power in the city's hands, right? So if the city is going to invest, but the city, I guess, like, in general, these systems have played against Black and Brown people. So why should advocates continue to advocate for all of the power to remain in the city? How do we protect ourselves and ensure
the income level for individuals and families? We are trying to do a better job when outreaching to agencies or nonprofits or partners or stakeholders to make sure that if I'm following you, Aisha, is that making sure that when these affordable units come up, that they're also reaching into our Black and Brown community to make sure that those folks know that those units are available.
One thing is, I think in our conversations just in general, and every city conversation I'm having around equity and inclusion, or diversity and all of that stuff. So in all of those conversations, I think a big part that is misunderstood or left out is the power dynamic. You're not going to have true equity without a shift in power. And that's as far as the reparations committee. That's why I always tell people, like, if you're not at the table, you on the menu. You know what I mean? And a lot of times our black community is not at the table. And so I'm happy to hold my seat on the affordable housing committee and be able to challenge that mindset of forgetting that a large population of people in Asheville are below our what is considered affordable income limits, 80% AMI. Like, that's not realistic for our area, and especially if we're talking about equity and inclusion, you know what I mean? And that topic. And so it's like, regardless of the well intentions, we still find our place back in the same mindset, because developers are saying it's too costly to build and they need the return on their investments. And then you have people who can't afford that return on the investment because the income limits, and it's all connected, prevents people of color or people in those lower income ranges from having access. You know what I mean? To those, so you can send out those notices to the community that, yeah, these are the affordable houses that are available. But at the same time, these are the affordable units. At the same time, the income, if you don't have the income, it's like we're trying to fix one problem, but it's still that other problem that's preventing the access still. So it's all about access, and the economic mobility here in general. One thing is there are Black developers in Asheville, and they actually got some units, but even for them, it's still in the 275 range. And I know because I looked at some of their units and they really nice. Ooh, you know what I'm saying? Like really, really nice for 275. But one thing is also recognizing, like Paul said, is we're partnering with organizations like the YMI, or those who, like, the city is restricted where they can't be specific to Black, but the YMI is mission driven for Black. So we, like, you're gonna partner with the agencies that's doing that work and that's committed to that population and doing that work, and it's not restricted from saying this is for Black people, like our partnership with Self-Help and Dog Health Trust for this down payment assistance program. And it's a pilot, and we're definitely looking at expanding it, and we want to keep doing it. But at the same time, like even now, the demand from the community that is reaching out to get down payment assistance. We also have a real estate apprenticeship program in partnership with convened. And so it's like, as we bringing out Black realtors and changing what that looks like, we also trying to get Black people into housing. And so our assistance is not restricted. They can layer it with anything. You know what I mean? Like, we even got people who help them walk through the city program, the city DPA programs, and different things like that, the other DPA programs out there, and fill out those applications. But it's recognizing, like, we gotta, like, the investment gotta shift, and that's a part of the powers and the money, and that's a big thing.
And if I could bounce off that with Dewana there, something that I did before COVID happened, because we get asked to go around to do some presentations, but like we're having this conversation on like, where's the public sector's solution to this problem? Like, and I was just looking on who is on this call so I don't get in trouble. But at the same point, we've got to challenge our private sector folks to be a part of this solution. I think about this sometimes, like we're running around like crazy at the city trying to do this, that, or the other. Like, and I look at public as solving these market-driven problems. We love the private folks, you know, and I'm glad that we've got some partnerships, but what about the pay and the living wage to actually be able to afford to live in this community? What about the banks and some kind of programs for better programs for first-time home buyers? Like a couple of those things that they kind of don't get discussed as much, but where are they at this table just for future conversations? Because we can't, without this massive amount of subsidy, we cannot solve all these problems. So I think it's like challenging the private sector, like your company should have like some kind of matching down payment assistance program, like help us out, because we do not have all that subsidy. And I wish the private sector folks would, you know, I'm sure they're lovely, but they step it up, you know, a little bit on all that. And I think that conversation needs to happen more, in my opinion. We can only do so much with our limited dollars. Once these ARP dollars are gone, American Rescue Plan, then what? You know, where are we at with those additional funding? So I hope some of those realistic conversations can happen, not in a challenging way, but a partnership way.
Right. I think I am so glad to be here, and I chose to make Asheville my home because this was the first place I ever moved where we were really talking about equity in the way that we talk about equity. And y'all, we have so much work to do, but we have done so much good work, right? So it's a continuum. It doesn't start and then stop. It's a forever thing that'll keep going. And so I'm committed to Asheville simply because of that. But simply because the work here is good, simply because we can have these conversations. And I get to say to people like, hey, Black people want to own some banks too, right? Like I get to say that. And there are places where it's too dangerous for people to say that. So we really live in a wonderful community. And while there's so much work to be done, We are all doing such good work. I want to remind you that you can take a look at Thrive's policy recommendations by going to their website. You can also come hang out with us over at the Lenoir, Rhyne Equity and Diversity Institute if you want to learn more about creating policies, procedural, and practice changes that shift diversity, equity, and inclusion in the workplace. We'd love to have you. Any final words, Kate?
So much thanks for all the expertise on this call. So many smart people working really hard. I just am going to put, just can't say it enough that I really think that we have to be having a long view here with some really solutions that have been lifted up tonight, but they have to be coordinated. We need the city planning department to be meeting with our county planning department. We need to be designing a strategy that's for our entire area. I know that both planning departments are working really hard. We need to have world-class housing that really tackles this problem. We need to be sure that our planning departments are well funded. I know that is like a really unsexy topic, but is true. So I just look forward to really working with people for the long haul on this issue and raising our voices to city and county to let people know that we really do want to make significant investments in constructing new housing and supporting all of these other strategies to increase our affordable housing stock. Thanks so much, everybody.